Hello, hello! I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. Today, I'm giving a 5 and 5 for the do's and don'ts of writing power creep, as I go into how to write well, and things to avoid. Power creep is a necessary storytelling mechanic, as the conflicts and challenges a character faces should grow and become more emotional as a novel and especially a series progress. Across both a novel and a series, the villains tend to get stronger, battles more epic, and the challenges more difficult to overcome. That makes sense. Your characters won't be like they're progressing if they're still struggling to defeat those level 1 grunts at the end of a novel. Instead, show how much the characters have learned and how much their skills have improved. Starting with the do's of writing power creep. Number 1, spread it across the team or make it take different forms. In Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang is the most powerful person in the group of heroes, and probably across the world. Yet everyone leveled up across the series. The one person in the core group of heroes who had no magical abilities learned the 4 non-magical specialties of each of the 4 nations, while Aang went on his own journey to master the 4 elements. This non-magical person was arguably the weakest of the group, yet they went on their own power creep journey to become essential. In fact, it was the plan they formulated which gave the heroes a chance to win the series' war. Number 2, recognize uneven power creep. In Yu Yu Hakusho, one of the humans on the team of 4 heroes decides to not go on their last journey. After having been outclassed severely by demons and psychics that they faced along the way, he decides to remain at home and live his life while the other 3 go off on their journey and save the world. There are a lot of series where I wonder why characters remain involved even after clearly becoming obsolete. If a character's best asset is witty banter or dying to inspire others, then at some point they really should opt out of the story so as not to become the team's anchor. Alternatively, you can find new ways to utilize that character's assets and skills so that they become relevant to the team again. But that was my point to number 1, so moving on. Number 3, create meaningful stakes. How can you balance power creep without leading to world-shattering events yet again? How can the problems the characters face still feel grounded after saving the planet in the last book? Sure, the end of the world will be bad, but the hero cares much more about protecting their friends and family. The best stories find ways to merge these together so that the personal and global catastrophes interact and meet. They don't throw a loved one off a bridge while also launching a nuke. That is a bad, overused trope, so come up with your own ethical dilemmas for your characters to face. Number 4, steady progression. If the hobbits in the Lord of the Rings had defeated Sauron at the end of book 1, and then struggled to defeat an orc in book 3, the progression would feel off. In this hypothetical scenario, by defeating the big bad, they had proven themselves, and facing off against anything weaker would feel too easy. There's an old sarcastic comment about how much better the Olympics would be if average people performed the events first. When the best of the best are sprinting a 400-meter race, they comparatively don't look that special. It's only after they cross the finish line and I can see that they are 30 seconds to a full minute faster than my absolute best that I can recognize how much those athletes have progressed from mere average. That steady progression is why many Shonen Jump series end with the hero defeating the deities of their universe. That might be a bit drastic for your series and your stories, but your baddies should still level up along with your heroes. And number 5, surprise your audience. Sometimes with the obvious. I'll speak as generically as possible, but there will be some mild spoilers for Naruto. The protagonists end up fighting in a great ninja war, and that conflict ignited my imagination as more and more villains were revealed to be behind the villains until someone revered as a god appeared to take their revenge. Yet that wasn't the main conflict of the story. For all of the power that the heroes had gained, the final showdown of the series turned into one of the most emotional and meaningful moments I've experienced in modern media. Once their powers burnt out, the fight devolved into a clash of fists, and I could not think of a better way of ending the series. This fight came as an absolute shock, yet it made complete sense. Looking back on it, the final battle feels inevitable. It reinforced the series' themes, resolved the lingering conflicts, and felt cathartic to read. Shifting over to the don'ts of power creep, we are returning to Naruto with number 1, sudden power creep. Once again, there will be spoilers for Naruto in 3, 2, 1. During the final arc, the two main antagonists who orchestrated the war were going on their own power creep journey. They were gaining more and more power with every hero they defeated, evolving in complex ways which made them seem both interesting and invincible. Then a new villain appeared who was apparently orchestrating the actions of the more interesting villains and stole their powers with a massive dose of hand wavium. There's a lot more to it with the story and reasoning behind that, but that is the end result. After following one villain who had been hyped from the start of the series and watching them expand and grow across this arc, they were replaced with someone who was far less interesting and who had yet to prove themselves. This new villain, though impressive, never reached the same peaks as the previous much more interesting villain. I feel like that's largely due to how they gained their powers and replaced the previous villain in what feels like a cheap shot rather than actually seeming to overpower them. Sure, it was implied that the new villain was more powerful than the previous, who we had watched progress across the arc, yet there was never a good comparison, so this felt like a misstep. It was only after eliminating this new villain, which then felt like a stepping stone, that the true, meaningful fight could occur as I described in my previous point. Number 2, Hero Complex. Power creep is often much worse in ensemble casts. With large groups, one character tends to excel far beyond the capabilities of everyone else, which leads to unbalanced fights as we wait for that main superhero to step in. Power fantasies are littered with this problem. Much of Dragon Ball Z is weaker characters waiting around for Goku to arrive and defeat the villains for them. I would make a case that the series reached its most interesting peak when Goku's son stepped out of his father's shadow to become the main superhero during the Cell games. Unfortunately, Goku's son wasn't as popular, so for the remainder of the series and in Dragon Ball GT and Dragon Ball Super, Goku returned to be the planet's savior while the supporting cast largely watched from the sidelines. Number 3, Defy logic. Power creep works best when it makes sense. Having a character gain some unknown power which makes them so much stronger than everyone else often feels like a deus ex machina. These moments rarely feel earned and often cheapen the hero's struggles and the conflicts they've overcome. Number 4, destiny or genetics. I don't like when a character is destined to become a hero, or when the children of the last hero inherit their parents' powers and then some. This tends to make for boring storytelling. Whenever I read a story about an unusual person who appears to be at the bottom of their society as they discover vast powers inside, my first assumption is that they are some long lost or hidden child of the rulers. Sadly, in the material I consume, that's proven to be true more often than not. This trope is overdone, and when the story makes a giant mystery around the source of the character's powers, I get bored watching them seek out answers I already know. And lastly, number 5, one-note power-ups. Do the main character only get physically stronger? The character unlocks some new power, but they never improve their skills. They aren't better at using magic, they just have more of it. And that is boring to read. Power creep is your chance to show how much a character has grown since the start of a novel. Demonstrate that their journey is worth taking by having the power creep be meaningful or branching out in unique ways, rather than being a simple 1 + 1 + 1. Those are my 5 and 5 tips for the do's and don'ts of writing power creep. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Writing to Write. If you enjoyed this content, then demonstrate your own power creep by mashing those like and subscribe buttons. It really does help this channel. Let me know in those comments about the worst instance of power creep you've read. Do you agree with my opinions, or is everything I said wrong? I post my running and writing progress on Instagram and Twitter, and there's a new Facebook group for this channel. So be sure to follow Writing to Write and join in with your own thoughts. See you next time. Until then, create power creep so that it makes sense for your characters within your story.